Hey guys, welcome to my first voiceover tutorial. I'm pretty much just going to be walking you guys through my thoughts as I draw, and hopefully it'll be helpful. So I'm just going to put up right now the reference picture I'm using so you guys can use it as a reference as well. Alright, so I used to start off by drawing the mouth first, but I don't know, lately I've just found it more helpful to start with just a general sort of shape of the head. So I'm just gonna draw like a bit of an egg shape here, um, just to sort of get down what size the sketch is gonna be, so I can visualize it. And I'm just marking where the center of the face is going to fall. So in this particular reference picture, he's kind of looking to the side a little bit. So I put that line slightly to the right. Um, and I'm just marking out roughly where the eyes and the nose and the mouth are going to fall. This for me, this usually changes like a lot. This little guideline that I'm doing here, it's not really it's not set in stone. Like not everything has to go where the lines in that are marked in the guideline are. So it's just a guide. So here we go. I'm starting with the mouth. Sometimes I start with the eyes. Sometimes, honestly, just whatever feels like it's going to be easiest. Either for me, it's usually mouth or eyes. Um, and when I start with the eyes, I usually start right eye first, then go left eye, and then work my way down the face. So then I go nose, then mouth. So now I'll go mouth, then nose, and then do the eyes. And I usually draw the right eye first every time. So I'm just marking out here. I usually start um, marking out like the center of the mouth. So for this one, his mouth is slightly open. So I started by marking that out and then darkening the corners right there around where his teeth show, and then also the very outer corners of the mouth, um, making those darker as well, and just making sure the expression's right. Like if you, for the corners of the mouth, if you put them too high or too low, it can really change the expression. So just making sure that's all right. But I'll go back to that and fix it up later. It's um, just sort of marking everything out for now. It doesn't have to be too perfect. So now for the nose, I'm just making sure that the size between the bottom of the nose and the cupid's bow, the top of the lips is right, because if that's too long or too short, um, it can just throw off the proportions a little bit. So yeah, for the nose, as you can see, I just put in the two little nostrils, and then the sides of the nose there. And I usually start off with like a circle shape to um, just to mark out like the general shape of the nose, and then I erase it after. So now I'm just um, perfecting this a little bit and going back to the mouth because I wasn't too happy with it. But just keep tweaking it until I was happy. And I will be speeding up some parts of this as well, because there are some bits where I just take a very long time, like I think when I'm doing the hair. So yeah, some bits will be sped up, but most of it will be real time. Just don't want it to be too long. So I'm almost done here. I think that looks all right. Pretty good. All right, moving along. So now, next thing I like to do is just mark out where the bottom of the chin is going to go. Trying not to make that too far down, like the space from the bottom lip, the bottom of the bottom lip to the tip of the chin. Sometimes I make that too big at first and it just looks like a massive chin. So I'm just trying to get those proportions right, just marking it out a little bit and then moving on to the eyes. And the eyes sometimes give me trouble, but pretty much what I try to look for when I'm in terms of proportion is I look at my reference picture and I look for the inner corner of the eye and where that lines up in comparison to like the side of the nose. So in the reference picture, the corner of the eye lines up. So the corner of his right eye, sorry, lines up a little bit. It's not perfectly in line with the right edge of his nose. It's the eye sits a little bit more into the center of the face. So that's what I'm trying to mimic here in terms of placement. And I'm just really focusing on the top curve of the eye and getting that right, trying to get that likeness because everyone's eye shape is different. So you just got to concentrate on the shape there and putting in the eyebrow. I find that when you add the eyebrows, it just like adds a lot of character. So I like to put that in sort of straight away so I can start to see it coming together. And I'm just using little hair-like strokes. I'm not defining it too much or right now or anything like that. Just blocking it in. And I often use my smaller razor pen to just uh, erase like the inside where the eyebrow begins, like on the inside, if that makes sense, and sort of like feather it out a little bit. I like that part to be like a little bit soft. So I just go back. I'm just looking at the piece so far as a whole and just going back um, on things every now and then that I think I can fix up. I don't really focus on one feature at a time and like finish that. Like I don't go, I'll finish the mouth now and then finish the nose, then finish the eyes and then tie it all together. I'll just sort of do all features sort of evenly at once. So now for the left eye, it's a bit of a different shape. So in this reference picture, the right eye is sort of like almond shaped. It's the top of the eyelid is quite just an even sort of curve, but on the left eye, it sort of goes to a point. I might insert some pictures and draw some lines so I can explain that better. It's a bit hard to explain in words. So shading the lips, I usually just shade it softly, nothing too dark because then it can just look, I don't know, a little bit out of place. I usually like the lips to look soft or the shading to be soft. Erasing some of those guidelines. That eraser pen is really handy for being precise. Erasing in small areas. Now I'm just connecting the sides of the face to the bottom jawline, still tweaking the mouth because I wasn't happy with it, and just slowly darkening areas, building it up slowly. You don't want to go in too dark straight away. And I think the Cupid's bow area was too defined there, so I just erased it. All right. I love adding the ears. I don't know why, but what I'm doing here is just I'm looking at where the bottom of the ear begins. And for this, if you look at the reference picture and look at the bottom of the ear and follow it across the face, it sort of lines up with the top of his lip, the top of his top lip. So that's where I started it on mine, and then the top of the ear lines up with his eye. So that's how I determine how to place the ear. And I'm just working on the face shape, going back to the eye, making sure the eyes are spaced apart to my liking. If you have a different art style, I mean, this is just how I do it. Um, but if you have a different art style where the proportions aren't so, you're not trying to get them like as close to the reference picture as you can, then just do whatever looks right for you. But this is just how I like it in my sketches. So with the eyes, I try not to make them too far apart or too close together. Getting that gap um, in the middle, the correct size, is important. Otherwise, it can just throw off your proportions. And usually the guide is, but this is not, don't follow this 100%, but about like one eye's width in between. That's just a good guide. It doesn't always apply. But here, I think it looks about right. It looks like one eye's length in between. Now I'm just darkening the eyebrows. And starting to go up into the forehead. And as I go, I'm just using my 0.2 millimeter Pentel lens to define the face shape, making those lines sharp, using my pen eraser to clean up around the lines if there's any like straggly bits coming off there, sort of cleaning them up. I like the line around the face in particular to be very defined. So I always, the top of the eye, I always, the what would you call it? Like the top lash line, let's call it. I always make that a lot darker than the bottom. I like to leave the lower lash line quite, or sometimes I don't even put it there, but quite a lot lighter. You know, you really want to add the definition on the top eyelid. Oh, and I love adding the neck. I don't know why. I love adding in the ears and the neck. It just, you can start to see the, uh, I don't know, you can just start to see it all come together. It starts to look more like a face when you add in the neck. And I'm just paying attention to the sides of the face and that gap in between the outer corner of the eye and the side of the face, really paying attention to that space right there and trying not to make it too big or too small, trying to get the proportions right there. And right now I don't really have it right, but I think I fixed it up. Lots of erasing, lots of eraser shavings that I probably should have swept out of the way. That's okay. And I have, if you're curious about which supplies I'm using, on my Instagram page in my story highlights, I have a highlight called supplies. And if you just click through the stories, there is a post that I made. You'll see all my supplies laid out there, and I've put all the names of them as well. But uh, the eraser I am using is the Tombow Mono Zero Eraser, the round one. So there's a rectangle version and a round one. The rectangle one's a little bit thicker, but the round one's really tiny, so it's really good. You can be very precise with it. And the eraser is the Lyra kneadable eraser. Actually, I think I'll just list the supplies I use at the start of the video. That will probably be easier. But yeah, I think there's probably other brands um, of pencil eraser. Just anything that um, has a really fine tip. They're so handy. I definitely one of my must-have supplies. I wouldn't be able to draw without them, honestly. All right. So now I'm just adding in the hairline, and what I think is important here is to not make the forehead too large, which um, I do sometimes by mistake. Just trying to match it to the reference picture, match the proportions. It's a fine line. Everything's a fine line between too too much space in between or too little, but it's just practice, and you train your eye to sort of uh, your eye will be able to notice what is uh, correct and what is well, I don't want to say correct and incorrect because honestly there's no right or wrong way, but your eye will notice um, things that you like and things that you don't like in terms of proportion, and you'll be able to search them out easier and fix them to your liking as you practice more. Ooh, I think I add in the eyebrow slit soon, which is satisfying. Ooh, I've got my gel pen. Here we go. I could have honestly just erased it, but I wanted to use my gel pen because it's satisfying. There we go. And I think I just define around the edge. There we go, making it sharp. I was very excited to put in that eyebrow slit, honestly. All right, here's another fun part. Adding in the hair. Now, I had trouble with this hair, not gonna lie. I kept making it too poofy. Something I struggle with. And sometimes, well, what I find in my case anyway, I'll look at the reference picture and in my head I'll go, okay, the hair sort of comes off the top of the head, like it sticks out this much. And then I'll draw it um the same amount that I see it sort of come off the head. I'll mimic that in my drawing, and then it will just look funny on my proportions. So I don't know if that made sense at all, but um, sometimes you just have to. Sometimes don't completely rely on what the proportions look like in the reference picture. Sometimes you got to tweak it, make it your own. Doesn't always have to look exactly like the reference picture. Sort of branch out from that, and that will help you find your own style as well. Um, I find that a lot with the hair. So, say if someone's hair is like in a slick back ponytail or something and it's really close to the scalp, and then I'll draw it close to the scalp in my sketch, but it will just look like too not not enough volume in the hair, and maybe they'll look bold or something. It'll just look funny, so I have to add a bit of dimension just to make it look right. So just if something just doesn't look right, just tweak it. Don't worry about what the reference picture looks like. Just make it your own. Sometimes your brain can your brain can make it better than the reference picture. It will be better. So I think that's what I did here because the hair was just looking too much. So I think I am going to speed it up a little bit soon. Um, I'll just show you because I'm just overall tweaking at the moment, just darkening areas like around the nose, the top of the eyes, and around in the corners of the mouth and things like that. Just slowly building up the darkness. And in a second, I'll get on to shading the neck. I think that really that little detail of shading the neck sort of ties everything together. Especially like under the jawline, get just where the jaw and the chin cast a shadow. I like to add that in. So I just switch around from like finishing the hair, tweaking the eyes, nose, mouth, just tweaking here and there and pulling it all together. All right, here we go. So I just use very light strokes here. And I quite like, I don't really use a lot of like curvy shapes. I quite like to keep it all straight, if that makes sense, like using straight lines. So you can see already just this little bit of definition here makes a difference in my opinion. And after this, I think I'll just speed it up a little bit. I'd like to use my kneadable eraser to erase the guidelines as well. It's just a really quick and easy way to do it. Alrighty. So I'm just speeding this clip up here because I'm just going around tweaking. And after this, I'll get on to the left ear. Earrings are really fun to draw as well. I love drawing jewelry. Alright, here we go. So, sketching in the left ear. So the top of it, it's because he's looking relatively straight onto the camera. It's the same as the right ear. So the top of the ear is lining up with the eye, and the bottom of the ear is lining up with the top of the lip. So that's where I'm going to place it. I think I did it a little bit too high there, so I'm just fixing it up. And one thing to make sure you don't forget, which is I've actually forgotten, I've completely finished, well, I thought I've finished a sketch, taken a picture of it and everything, gone to post it, and then on one of the ears, I forgot to add like the inner details of the ear. Like, I just left it like that, like plain inside. So remember to add in those details. Now sketching in the details of the earring. Something so satisfying about drawing earrings, I think. So just speeding it up once again, connecting the hair here, making sure those proportions are all right. And then I'll get on to the clothing. And I usually don't draw too much more than the shoulders unless I'm doing like a half body or a full body, because I like to just concentrate on the face and the facial expression. Right, so here we go. And just making sure I get that angle of the shoulder slanting downwards. I like to add the tiny little uh, bumpy details of the shirt, because usually, fabric folds, it doesn't sit completely flat. So I like to add those little details in, especially where it first, where you can see it sort of mm, come around the top of the shoulder, where it first starts. You want to add that little bit of um, 3D, I don't know how to explain it, just to make it look like it's coming around the shoulder and not just sitting there on the front, if that makes sense. I think I had a little bit of trouble with this side, but I'll fix it up. And just sketching in the collar. Lightly, and then defining it a little bit more, using sort of straight lines, not too many curves. Now, as you'll see here, I struggle a bit with this left shoulder, so I sped this part up. I don't know, I couldn't get it looking right, so I just kept erasing and redrawing it until I was happy with it. Always remember you can erase, so don't stress too much about getting everything right. And I think I'm finally happy with it here, so I'm moving on. Now I can start on shading the hair. So for this I like using my chunky pencil for the hair. I'm not sure, I got it from Daiso, I'm not sure exactly the measurements of the lead width or thickness. But if you, even using like a 0.9 millimeter or like a 1 millimeter, that would do the trick. I just find that when I have um a thicker lead, I guess, is that what you call it? Um, I can cover more space in a short amount of time. And I just like the sketchy look of it. So I'm just using that now. Blocking in the colors just on my reference. I'm just trying to pinpoint the areas where the shadows fall and just mimic that in my sketch. And usually closer to the when the hair is closer to the scalp, there'll be more of a shadow where it's sort of curving around, and the hair above will sort of cast a shadow on it. So I also find that like near the ears, there's more shadows, usually, like near the side of the face. So I like to put shadows there as well. And I don't really add highlights with like a gel pen or anything. I just leave parts as I'm sketching for the highlights, letting the paper come through and just make highlights naturally. So now I'm just adding in the details of the ears, which I quite like this part. You don't have to be too particular. I find even if you do this in a kind of messy way, it turns out looking good. You don't pay too much attention to the ears anyway. I'm just checking the reference and seeing where the shadows are and just placing those where I think they should go. And then almost done, I think. Yeah, moving on to the right here. This one doesn't, it's on such an angle, so it's not really got as much detail in there. All right, now speeding it up again because it's just more tweaking. So pretty much just going over everything, defining it, seeing what I can do to make it resemble whoever is in the reference photo. Really paying attention to their facial features and the shapes of everything and trying to get those right. Adding a few more shadows there. I wasn't really happy with the shading, so I just had to fix it up a little bit on the neck. And now is the satisfying part. I'm doing the earrings. So for the earrings, the metal is usually like a little bit thick. So I don't use my 0.2 because it's just a little bit too thin. I like using my 0.3 for earrings, or even 0.5 sometimes. So here I'm using my 0.2 millimeter. I'm just going in with that pretty heavy-handedly, really defining those shapes. And now going in with my white gel pen and going on the inside. So I'm leaving the sort of, I'm going in with a really thin line of white so that the black from what I put in before shows on the outside, if that makes sense. So I'm just filling in the inside with the white gel pen and letting the outline of the 0.3 I used before show through on the outside. And I'm just defining that now with my 0.2. And now I like to shade darker on the inside of the lips, like where they meet, or in this case, near the teeth. I like to shade darker there and then fade it to lighter when it reaches the outside of the lips. And I added in like a few like tiny little lines to mimic the texture of the lips, but I don't really put those in, like I don't make them super apparent. I just do them very lightly. And leaving that little bit there for a little bit of shine on the bottom lip. And sometimes I go and define that with a gel pen, the shine on the bottom lip, but I think in this case I just leave it. I used my eraser, I think, and then I leave it. Cleaning up any little unwanted sketch marks with my kneadable eraser. And just defining the bottom of the nose there. And now just tweaking more, finishing things off, and then I'll move on to finishing off the eyes. And it's all coming together now. Doing a little bit of shading on the collar, sort of around where it folds around the shoulders. Alright, so here finally getting on to the eyes. I'm going to shade those in a second. Shading the iris lightly. Not yet, but soon. Here we go. So I'm just defining the iris here. And then I'll fill that in. There we go. I don't often add pupils into my eyes just because I draw on quite a small scale. And I don't know, just whenever I add a pupil, it just looks odd to me and I like how it looks without it, so I just leave it. And I don't shade the iris too dark either because that can look a little jarring in my opinion. I just keep it sort of a neutral tone. And now I'm sort of going in and defining, sorry, the hair strokes in the eyebrows, darkening it in some places, sort of getting it to match the hair because the hair is quite dark right now because that pencil of mine, and I press quite hard as well, it goes quite dark. So I'm just matching the eyebrows to the tone of the hair and doing slight shading around the hairline just so where the hair begins, um, between the forehead and the hair, it won't look so jarring. I just like to add a little bit of shading up there where the hair starts so it looks like it's casting a little bit of shadow onto the skin and it just blends it a little bit nicer. And just continuing to tweak the eyes. Okay, so we're actually almost at the end now. This part just involves, now that I've got all of the features down and I'm happy with the proportions, everything's, most things that need to be shaded have been shaded. And now it's just pretty much finishing touches. So I'm speeding this up. Just defining all of my lines, making them clean and sharp, and erasing anything that doesn't need to be there. And now I'm going to add something else that I really like to put into my sketches is just a little bit of shading around the space between the top of the eyes and the eyebrows. So I'm actually going to insert a picture because I tried to explain this before and I had to delete the audio because I just had no idea what I was talking about. So it's this part here. These shadows here, you can see them sort of cast by the bridge of the nose under the eyebrow, under the inside inner eyebrows, inner half of the eyebrows. It's hard to explain. Um, but yeah, I really think shading here is important to me anyway. It just brings that little bit of dimension to the eye area. So just adding that in now, just really, really light strokes on the pencil. And that's pretty much it. I'll just leave the rest of the video in real time. There's not much left. It's just me fixing up anything. Once again, the word of the day is tweaking. Lots of tweaking. But yeah, I hope this was helpful. I'm really sorry if I was bad at explaining anything, but hopefully you could just see as I was sketching what was sort of going on in my process. and hopefully I was able to explain my thoughts behind it. And now my hair is popping into the frame. I'll tie it up next time. Oh well, at least it was at the end and not throughout the whole video. But anyway, thanks for watching, and I really hope this helps you and can help you improve. And I'll make another one soon, and I'm sure as I make more, I'll get better at explaining things, and the videos will just be better in general. Alright, so this is the finished piece, and I hope you like it.